It is the 20th of December and it's time for the 20th entry in my 24 ghost stories for Christmas. Did I say 20 enough there? I don't think I did. Let's say it one more time. 20. Alright, so today's entry is going to be the 1971 adaptation of, once again, the M.R. James short story, The Stalls of Barchester. This was, in fact, the first entry in the BBC's A Ghost Story for Christmas, and unless I throw something in at the last minute, this most probably will be the last time I talk about this series before Christmas, so you're probably all really happy about that. Alright, so this story stars Clive Swift and Robert Hardy. Clive Swift plays a character called Dr. Black. Interestingly, actually plays the same character in the next adaptation, A Warning to the Curious, which I've already talked about. Dr. Black is, as with a lot of M.R. James stories, doing a little bit of academic research, and he finds a chest. I think it's in like is it in a library or in the archives for a local church, and this chest has been ordered to remain sealed by the archdeacon of the time. Now, he opens it up and he starts to read this diary from a previous archdeacon who is played by Robert Hardy, and we get to see this clergyman's account of what happened to him in flashback, and it keeps cutting to Dr. Black in the library reading through his diary. So Robert Hardy's character is a clergyman, and he's the archdeacon in waiting. I think it's archdeacon, or maybe I think it's archdeacon, and he is waiting basically to become the new top dog in the sort of local cathedral. But what happens is that there's a man, an archdeacon, who's already there. He's already the boss, and he just seems to live on and on and on and on and on. He's right into his 90s. He's still going and doesn't want to give up the position. And Robert Hardy's character sort of waits, initially patiently, and eventually they seem to be really losing the plot. Unfortunately, what happens is that the archdeacon then dies by tripping up on his staircase and falling to his death. The question then remains, was his death caused by Robert Hardy's character? Were the stairs set up in a certain way so that he would fall when he came down them? And was he in cahoots with a maid that worked for the archdeacon? Robert Hardy's character then becomes the top clergyman and sort of runs the local cathedral, and initially everything was going well. He's quite happy, but he also stays in his predecessor's house, and he starts to hear noises. He starts to hear voices, and because, again, as with a lot of M.R. James stories, he's a rationalist. He starts to believe that he's losing his mind, that he's got some sort of mania that is coming on, or some sort of mental health problem, or they wouldn't have called it that in those days. And as it goes on, he starts to also see things. He starts to see when he's sitting in the cathedral, when there's a service happening, he sits at these stalls, hence the Stalls of Barchester, because it's Barchester Cathedral, and as he places his hands on two sort of statuettes that are either side on the stalls, at different times they turn into different things, and he sort of panics, thinks he sees something, then they go back to just being the normal statues. One point there's a human skull, at the other point there's this sort of like a fur-like, sort of like a cat almost, on the other, and he starts to see this black cat throughout the house. And again, the voices get worse, and he just really starts to assume that he's losing his mind, and he keeps writing in his diary, I must be firm, I must be firm. So we get a little bit of the sort of Edgar Allan Poe Telltale Heart vibe going on here. It does feel as if it's partly an exploration of guilt. Whether he should be guilty or not, I'll leave that up to you for when you watch it. And I don't really want to spoil any more of it, but it does escalate the things that happen in the house at night escalate, and there's some really chilling moments. There's one moment in particular where he just sees something moving through a shaft of light into the darkness, and this is sort of obviously pre. I don't know if it's pre-gas light, but it's certainly pre-electrical light. So everything is illuminated by candles, which gives it that real sort of almost gothic feel to it. And it genuinely gets really creepy. Now, it's quite a long episode of this series. It's 45 minutes long, but it's really worth it. Some people have reviewed it saying that it's quite ponderous compared to the following entries. I don't really think that's a problem. I think it works really well. It's the story begins as it's developing a sense of lore, you know, a sense of mythology as this man Dr. Black looks into this person's previous history, and that gives you a real sense of depth and mystery and intrigue to what's going on. I think it's an excellent entry in the series. I don't think it's up there with A Warning to the Curious, which was the follow-up entry in the series, but I certainly think it's really worth checking out. And yeah, it's interesting that they had the Dr. Black character in A Warning to the Curious as well, which is set in the sort of 1930s. And you know, in the original, in the Stalls of Barchester, he is obviously doing the research, and then he tries to go and find out more about what happened to this clergyman, and whether it's connected somehow to the Stalls of Barchester and all that sort of stuff. And it has this typically Jamesian ending where we have this explanation of something that had happened previous to the clergyman's time to sort of explain what had been happening. And we often get that. The ghost story, you know, it comes across maybe as a little bit cliched now, because I think what happens in this entry is you get the big spooky climax, and then the episode lasts for like another 5 minutes. So and it does all of the sort of academic explanations after that, and that's interesting. You don't get that in, you know, Whistle and I'll Come to You, which came before it, which wasn't part of the Ghost Story for Christmas series, but really was what gave birth to it. It sort of ends on the big crescendo. A Warning to the Curious ends pretty much, it's got a slight epilogue on it, but it ends on a big climax, as does the Ash Tree, which I won't be talking about in this series, I don't think, and as does the Signalman. So they all do, and the Treasure of Abbot Thomas, they all have that big moment, but in this one you actually get the explanation afterwards, as it's sort of the tension sort of diminishes, which is interesting because that's actually more like a Jamesian story. It's more accurate that way. I haven't read The Stalls of Barchester for a long time, but I don't think the Dr. Black character is in the story. I don't think there's any flashback, and I think that it's more. I don't think you get to see as much in the story as you do in this, because you actually see some sort of physical manifestations of whatever you want to call it, ghosts, spirits, whatever. But anyway, it's definitely worth checking out. It's another great entry in the series, and it was a great way to kick it off. And Robert Hardy is excellent in it, as is Clive Swift. Both who would go on to actually have careers in like situation comedies. Robert Hardy was probably most famous for being in All Creatures Great and Small, and Clive Swift was in Keeping Up Appearances. So it is quite interesting to see them in this more serious, spooky, chilling ghost story. So go check it out, and I'll be back tomorrow with the 21st entry in my 24 Ghost Stories for Christmas. I got most of my Christmas shopping finally done. I think I've got one more thing to get today, so thank God for that.